Ethan Holloway never saw the betrayal coming. For years, he had built a life with Lena, trusting her, loving her, believing that they were unbreakable. And Gregory Holloway, his father, his mentor, the man he had admired since childhood, was supposed to be his greatest protector. But behind closed doors, in the darkest corners of his own home, they had been hiding a secret so vile it shattered everything Ethan thought he knew. When the truth finally surfaced, it wasn't just anger that consumed him. It was something far more dangerous, because betrayal has a price, and Ethan was ready to make them pay. Lena Marsh had everything a woman could ask for: a beautiful home, a loving husband, and a bright young son. To the outside world, her life was the picture of happiness. Brooksville was a quiet town where everyone knew each other, and the Marsh family was well respected. Ethan Marsh, her husband, was a hard-working construction manager, known for his dedication to his job and his unwavering commitment to his family. He had met Lena 7 years ago at a friend's wedding, and their connection had been instant. Within a year, they were married, and soon after, they welcomed their son, Oliver. Ethan's father, Gregory Marsh, was a retired businessman who had built a successful career before stepping away to enjoy his later years. After losing his wife to an unexpected illness, he had become even closer to his only son, often visiting Ethan and Lena's home to spend time with his grandson. At 61, Gregory still carried himself with an air of authority, his silver-streaked hair and sharp features making him appear both dignified and intimidating. He was the kind of man who commanded respect, and despite his age, he exuded a quiet confidence that made people take notice. Lena had never wanted for anything material in her marriage. Ethan provided well, ensuring that she had a comfortable life. Their house was spacious, decorated with warm colors and modern furnishings. Oliver had a backyard to play in, a room filled with toys, and a mother who doted on him. Every Sunday, the family attended church, followed by a home-cooked meal that Lena carefully prepared. To everyone who saw them, they were the perfect family, stable, loving, and unbreakable. But perfection has cracks, even when they are hidden beneath a flawless surface. Despite Ethan's devotion, his demanding job kept him away for long hours. He would leave early in the morning and return home late, exhausted and distracted. Over time, Lena began to feel a sense of loneliness creeping in. She loved her husband, but their marriage had become routine, predictable. The passion they once shared had faded into something familiar but uninspiring. The small moments of affection that had once made her feel special were now rare. Ethan was always tired, always focused on work, and when he was home, his attention was on Oliver. At first, Lena pushed these feelings aside. She kept busy with her daily routines, taking Oliver to school, meeting friends for coffee, attending yoga classes. But the emptiness she felt lingered, growing stronger with each passing month. She didn't know when exactly it started, but at some point, she found herself looking forward to Gregory's visits more than she should have. Gregory was different from Ethan. He had an old-fashioned charm, a way of making her feel seen in, a way that Ethan no longer did. He listened when she spoke, complimented her cooking, noticed when she changed her hair. When he visited, he would help with repairs around the house, lifting heavy furniture, fixing things Ethan never had time for. He was kind to Oliver, patient and playful in a way that reminded her of how Ethan used to be before work consumed his life. It was small things at first, a lingering glance, a casual touch on her arm that stayed a second too long. She told herself it was nothing, that she was imagining it, but deep down, she knew there was something there, something dangerous. She tried to dismiss the way her heart raced when Gregory was near, the way she found herself thinking about him when he wasn't around. One evening, after Oliver had gone to bed and Ethan was still at work, Gregory stayed a little longer than usual. They sat in the dimly lit living room, a glass of wine in Lena's hand, the atmosphere heavy with an unspoken tension. He talked about his late wife, about how lonely he had been since she passed. Lena found herself opening up in ways she never had before, admitting how isolated she sometimes felt in her own home. The conversation was innocent, but something shifted between them that night. A door had been opened, and neither of them had the willpower to close it. Lena told herself it was harmless. Gregory was Ethan's father, a man decades older than her. Nothing would ever happen. But deep down, she knew she was already standing, too close to the edge of something she wouldn't be able to come back from. Lena knew she was playing with fire, but the thrill of the forbidden was intoxicating. It started with stolen glances and subtle touches that lingered just a second too long. The kind of gestures that could still be brushed off as accidents, though both of them knew better. She could feel it in the way Gregory looked at her, the way his voice softened when he spoke to her, the way his hand would graze against hers when they passed in the hallway. It was dangerous, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. She had never thought of herself as someone who would cheat. Before she met Ethan, she had been in relationships but had never once strayed. Even in her marriage, she had never been tempted until now. It wasn't just about attraction. It was the way Gregory made her feel. With Ethan, she had become invisible, another piece of furniture in the house. With Gregory, she felt wanted, admired. It was a feeling she hadn't realized she had been missing until it was right in front of her. The first time something truly crossed the line, it had been unplanned. Ethan had taken Oliver on a weekend fishing trip, giving Lena 2 days to herself. Gregory had stopped by to check on her, offering to fix a leaky kitchen faucet. She hadn't expected him, and when she opened the door, she felt a flicker of excitement she couldn't quite suppress. He stepped inside, the scent of his cologne lingering in the air, his presence filling the house in a way that made her stomach tighten. As he worked under the sink, she sat on the counter, sipping a glass of wine, watching him. The way his hands moved, steady and strong, the way his sleeves were rolled up, exposing his forearms. It was a simple moment, yet every second felt charged. When he finished, he stood up, wiping his hands on a rag, and looked at her. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. She wasn't sure who moved first, but suddenly his hands were on her waist, pulling her close. The moment their lips met, she knew there was no turning back. The guilt was there, but it was drowned out by something stronger. Desire, longing, the hunger for something she had been deprived of for too long. It was reckless, dangerous, but in that moment, it felt inevitable. After that night, there was no hesitation. They found ways to be alone whenever possible. Gregory would drop by when Ethan was at work, sometimes under the guise of helping with household repairs, sometimes without an excuse at all. Lena stopped questioning the morality of it, stopped thinking about the consequences. She lived for the moments they shared, the stolen hours behind locked doors, the adrenaline rush of secrecy. At first, she convinced herself that no one would ever find out. Ethan was too trusting, too preoccupied with work to notice the subtle changes. She was careful, making sure to delete messages, to fix her appearance before Ethan came home. Gregory was equally cautious, never staying too long, never acting differently around his son. It was a perfect illusion until the first crack appeared. One afternoon, as Lena walked out of a local motel where she and Gregory had spent a few hours together, she felt eyes on her. She turned her head slightly and saw Miriam Holt, their neighbor, standing outside a coffee shop just across the street. The older woman's eyes narrowed slightly as if trying to process what she was seeing. Lena's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to smile and wave, acting as if nothing was wrong. Miriam waved back but didn't smile. For the next few days, paranoia gnawed at Lena. Every time she saw Miriam, she wondered if the woman knew something. But as time passed and no one said anything, she forced herself to relax. She was being ridiculous. Miriam was probably just running errands and hadn't thought anything of it. But what she didn't know was that Miriam had noticed something long before that day. She had seen Lena getting into Gregory's car on multiple occasions. She had seen them talking in hushed tones in the driveway when they thought no one was watching. And now, she had seen Lena stepping out of a motel without Ethan. Miriam wasn't the type to gossip. She didn't spread rumors without proof. But she also wasn't the type to ignore something that felt off. She decided to mention it casually, to Ethan the next time they spoke, just enough to see his reaction. That moment was coming sooner than Lena realized. Ethan had always trusted Lena. He was the kind of man who believed in loyalty, who never questioned the love he thought they shared. Even when work kept him away for long hours, he never doubted that his wife was faithful, that their home was a place of honesty and love. But trust has a way of blinding people to the truth, and Ethan had been blind for far too long. It started as a whisper in the back of his mind, something he tried to dismiss. Lena had always been affectionate, always. Met him at the door with a smile. But lately, there had been a shift, something so subtle that he almost missed it. She was distracted, distant in a way that didn't make sense. Some nights, she took long walks alone, saying she needed fresh air. Other times, she was glued to her phone, quickly locking the screen when he entered the room. Then there were the small inconsistencies. A perfume scent on the sheets that wasn't hers. The way she suddenly took more time getting ready, choosing dresses he hadn't seen in years. It didn't add up, but Ethan told himself he was overthinking. After all, Lena wasn't the type of woman who would betray him. Then Miriam Holt said something that shattered the illusion. It happened on a quiet afternoon when Ethan had stepped outside to check the mail. Miriam, the elderly widow who lived next door, approached him with the hesitant concern of someone who didn't want to interfere but couldn't stay silent. She mentioned, in the most casual way possible, that she had seen Lena in town recently. She didn't say much, just that she had noticed Lena getting into Gregory's car on multiple occasions. Then she paused, watching Ethan carefully before adding something else. She had seen Lena leaving a motel alone. The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He tried to keep his expression neutral, tried to act as though it was nothing. He even forced a chuckle, thanked Miriam for letting him know, and went back inside. But the moment the door shut behind him, his hands clenched into fists, his pulse hammering in his ears. He didn't want to believe it. He couldn't believe it. Lena wouldn't do this to him. Gregory wouldn't do this to him. But doubt was like a disease, spreading rapidly, infecting every thought he had. That night, he lay beside Lena in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her betrayal before he even had proof. He could hear her breathing softly, her body relaxed in sleep, completely unaware that everything was about to change. The next day, Ethan made a decision. He needed to know the truth. He needed evidence. He installed a small hidden camera in their living room, angling it toward the main hallway. It wasn't much, but it was enough to capture anyone coming and going. If something was happening behind his back, he would see it with his own eyes. For days, he waited. And then, finally, the truth revealed itself. Ethan had left for work that morning like usual, but instead of going to the job site, he parked his truck a few streets away and watched the house from a distance. Hours passed, and nothing happened. Then, just as doubt started creeping in again, Gregory's car pulled into the driveway. Ethan's stomach twisted. He felt sick, felt the anger bubbling under his skin, but he forced himself to stay put. He needed to see this through. Gregory stepped out of the car, walked to the front door, and let himself in. Minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. When Ethan finally returned home, he felt like he was moving in a haze. He went straight to the camera footage, his hands shaking as he pulled up the recorded video. What he saw confirmed everything. Gregory and Lena, alone together. The way she greeted him, the way their bodies leaned too close, the way she touched his arm, her fingers trailing in a way that made Ethan's stomach turn. Then, the final proof, the kiss. Ethan stared at the screen, his vision blurring. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a mistake. It was betrayal in its purest form. His own wife, his own father. Something inside him snapped. Ethan had always been a patient man, always slow to anger. But some things couldn't be forgiven. Some betrayals couldn't be overlooked. He wouldn't confront them immediately. No, that would be too easy. He would make them pay. Ethan spent the next few days in silence, letting the weight of the truth sink in. Every moment he spent in the house felt like a lie. He watched Lena go about her day, pretending to be the devoted wife she had always claimed to be, unaware that he knew everything. She smiled at him, kissed his cheek, cooked his meals, all while carrying on with his father behind his back. It was sickening. He thought about confronting her, about screaming in her face and demanding to know how she could do this to him. But words weren't enough. There was no apology that could erase what she had done, no explanation that could make it right. She had made a fool of him, and so had Gregory. The two people he trusted most had betrayed him in the worst possible way. The humiliation was unbearable, and the anger inside him grew into something darker. Ethan started planning. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do, but he knew one thing. This wouldn't end with a simple confrontation. He wanted them to feel what he felt. He wanted them to know what it was like to be trapped, powerless, and afraid. That Friday, he set everything into motion. He told Lena he had to work late and that she should invite his father over for dinner. He knew she would. She wouldn't be able to resist the opportunity to spend time alone with Gregory, especially when she thought Ethan wouldn't be home. At 7 o'clock, Ethan parked his truck a few streets away and walked back to the house. He moved quietly, slipping in through the back door. The house was dimly lit, and from the hallway he could hear the low murmur of voices in the dining room. He peeked around the corner and saw them sitting together, a bottle of wine between them, their laughter soft and intimate. His stomach twisted in rage, but he kept himself under control. He had come too far to lose his composure now. He waited until they were comfortable, until they had settled into the illusion of safety. Then, with slow, deliberate steps, he walked into the room. Lena's face went pale when she saw him. Gregory stiffened in his chair, his eyes widening in alarm. They both knew in an instant that something was wrong. Ethan said nothing as he placed a second bottle of wine on the table, this one already opened and carefully prepared. He forced a smile and told them he had finished work early, that he wanted to surprise them. He poured them each a glass, watching as they hesitated before taking cautious sips. Minutes passed. The poison worked quickly. Gregory was the first to notice something was wrong. His hands trembled as he tried to stand, but his legs gave out, beneath him. Lena clutched her throat, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. Ethan watched as they struggled, their bodies weakening, their minds realizing too late that they had walked into a trap. He dragged them both down to the basement, tying them to chairs before the full effects of the drug could wear off. The room was cold, the dim light casting long shadows against the cement walls. Gregory groaned, his head lolling forward, while Lena's eyes were wide with terror. She tried to speak, but Ethan didn't care to hear her excuses. This was where they would stay. No food, no water. Just the two of them, together in the darkness, forced to face what they had done. He wanted them to feel the slow, gnawing pain of betrayal, to suffer as he had suffered. Ethan sat upstairs in silence, listening to their muffled cries. He didn't go back down. He didn't need to. He already knew how this would end. The house felt eerily quiet in the days that followed. Ethan moved through the rooms like a ghost, his mind numb, his body heavy with exhaustion. He had expected to feel satisfaction, maybe even closure, but instead, there was only emptiness. In the basement, the cries had stopped. The first day, Lena had screamed until her voice became hoarse, pleading for Ethan to let them go, promising it wasn't what he thought. Gregory had tried to reason with him at first, speaking in a calm, measured voice, but when he realized there was no getting through to his son, panic set in. They both begged, pleaded, promised to leave, to never say a word, but Ethan didn't care. By the second day, their voices grew weaker. Dehydration set in, making every sound they made more pitiful, more desperate. Ethan avoided going downstairs. He didn't want to see them, didn't want to feel the weight of their suffering, pressing down on him. But at the same time, he needed to know. On the third day, he finally forced himself to check. He unlocked the basement door and stepped inside, the cold air rushing up to meet him. The smell of sweat and fear clung to the walls. Lena's head was slumped forward, her body limp against the chair. He thought for a moment that she was dead, but then he saw the slight rise and fall of her chest. She was barely holding on. Gregory, however, wasn't moving. His eyes were open but lifeless. His skin had taken on a sickly pale hue, and Ethan knew, without having to check, that he was gone. A wave of something unfamiliar washed over him. Not guilt, not regret, but a strange kind of sadness. This man had raised him, had been his father. But in the end, he had betrayed him in the worst way possible. Ethan turned his attention back to Lena. She was too weak to lift her head, too dehydrated to form words. Her breath was shallow, her lips cracked. She wouldn't last much longer. He had thought he wanted this, to watch her waste away, to let her suffer the way she had made him suffer. But standing there, looking at the broken woman before him, he realized something. It wasn't enough. Letting her die like this was too easy. She needed to feel fear, real fear. The kind of fear he had felt when he had watched the footage of her. With Gregory, the kind of fear that ate away at the soul. He untied her. Her body collapsed to the floor, too weak to move. He grabbed her by the arm, dragging her up the stairs. She tried to fight, but she had no strength left. Once they reached the kitchen, he poured a glass of water and placed it in front of her. She stared at it, unsure if it was another trick. "Drink?" Ethan said, his voice cold, devoid of emotion. She hesitated for only a second before grabbing the glass, gulping the water down in frantic, desperate swallows. When she finished, she looked up at him, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. Gratitude? Fear? A twisted combination of both? He let her rest for a few minutes before grabbing his car keys. Without a word, he pulled her to her feet and led her outside. She tried to ask where they were going, but he didn't answer. The drive was long, the silence between them thick. Lena didn't ask questions. She knew better. When he finally stopped, they were deep in the woods, miles from town. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of night animals. Ethan stepped out, walked around to her side, and pulled her out of the car. She stumbled, still weak, but managed to stand. Her eyes darted around, realizing how isolated they were. Her breath quickened. "Ethan." Her voice was barely above. A whisper. He didn't respond. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out the gun. Lena's body went rigid. She took a step back, but there was nowhere to run. Tears welled in her eyes, but Ethan saw no remorse in them. Only fear. And that was what he wanted. He wanted her to feel it down to her bones. He raised the gun. A single shot echoed through the trees, and then there was silence.